unless you want to. This Hangout airs live. Oh, wait. Everybody, there's no way that we could possibly let that get on. Shh. You're going to give away the ancient Chinese secret. No. We are going to give away all the secrets, actually. Here on the Audible, welcome everyone to, well, certainly you can feel your blood flowing a little more than we have on these Thursday nights in the off-season. Not that we haven't had fun on Thursday nights in the off-season. Sigmund Bloom here, Cecil Lammy on assignment, and Cecil wanted me to pass on to those of you who know what's going on, sending him good vibes, sending his mom good vibes. He wanted me to thank all of you for that and say that your good vibes are working more good vibes. Always appreciated there. So I'm always happy to be here with Mr. Matt Waldman, Mr. Gene Bramall. Matt, training camps underway. How do you feel? Are you breathing it in? Are you starting to feel like yourself again?
I'm actually holding my breath because I'm waiting for like the preseason to start because the stank of like the first week of training camp. I just kind of like want to wait for that to be over. Injuries and bad play and micro analysis of every single play that goes on Twitter. That was a great play. Oh, he dropped that ball. Okay, so how did he do? Yeah.
And Dr. Gene Bramall, and Dr. Gene has been doing an incredible job already getting us oriented. You're our orientation to the pup list, to the NFI, and so far, knocking on some wood there, Gene, nothing serious to report yet. We always root first and foremost for everybody to get through camp and the preseason healthy. Are you feeling your blood flowing as we have every day now multiple teams telling us who's active, who's on the pup list, and we even do actually have a few injury situations to report, guys getting hurt not in training camp, before training camp?
Oh, I don't know what Matt's complaining about. That's awesome. I love microanalysis and overreaction and all of that. I mean, it's wonderful. It's the best time of the year.
I mean, did you see his blood pressure spike just now?
Oh, we need to get the telemetry. We totally need to get the telemetry on Dr. Gene whenever we're asking him certain questions. Whenever I ask him to put a percentage number on something.
Totally calm. Calmer than you are, dude.
Calmer. That's right. Calmer than you are.
That's just medical training.
No, it's a necessary evil. We've been waiting for training camps for months and months and months, and we've gone from how many pounds did somebody lose or gain to
Right.
who's riding a motorcycle to who's dancing with his shirt off and all those sorts of things. So this is the natural evolution of things, and in a week no one's going to care about the 15th rep on 7-on-7 in 95-degree heat. We're going to be looking forward to preseason games and roll from there. So
I just feel like
time. We'll get there.
I feel like we almost could have done, like, in that moment, if we had like whiz bang video editors, like a montage. Kellen Winslow popping a wheelie on his motorcycle and Gronk dancing. Like all the great moments in preseason, off-season, over analysis of injuries. But we always have Dr. Gene to insulate us, to be that voice of reason. Dr. Gene brought to you by Xanax. Actually, on that note, I'm going to bring you a word from one of our sponsors tonight.
Is it Xanax?
It is not Xanax, although Xanax, if you're out there, I don't know which pharmaceutical company owns the rights to Xanax right now, but if you're
By the way,
out there,
not to kill your live read, but
no, please.
I have never once written a prescription for Xanax, just so you know.
Not even if someone's like going to have to fly to, across the ocean.
Okay, maybe once.
That's right.
Yeah,
seriously.
just one, though. Just one.
I think you are correct, though. I think I did do it one time for that particular reason.
That's right. So everybody out there, that.
Carry on.
If Dr. Gene will give a prescription for Xanax, if flying a long haul flight makes you nervous, Xanax. Dr. Gene.
I'm going to Vegas in January, Gene.
Yeah. Well,
I think.
You definitely don't want the Xanax.
I might need some Xanax, though.
You'll need it after Vegas. What you won't need. How do I even? I don't even know how to. Now it's time to. Let's all get serious. Can you tell how giddy we are tonight?
That's all right. I'll put myself on mute.
Yeah. Now it's Dr. Gene initiating the hijinks. I want to give you a note from our sponsor tonight, one of our sponsors, FanDuel.com. Building a team is easy. Pick your players. Stay under the cap. Sit back. Watch your team win. Entry fees start at just $1. Anyone can play. If you know fantasy, come and prove it at FanDuel.com. And if you have anything to do with FootballGuys.com, then you know fantasy. And speaking of that, special offer for our listeners. If you are a new FanDuel user, and you deposit $10, you will get a 1-year Football Guys Insider Pro subscription for free. You do this by going to FanDuel.com, click on the microphone upper right-hand corner, use the code FBGPod, sign up now. You get the free subscription, you get the $10 to play with. And if you already have a FootballGuys.com Insider Pro subscription, we'll just add on another year. FanDuel.com, every week is a new season. That's FanDuel, FanDuel.com. Use the code FBGPod, claim your free Football Guys Insider Pro subscription today if you're a new user. It is a new season, actually. We don't need every week to be a new season because it is a new season. And it's a new beginning for Josh Gordon. Gene, let's start with, and we're still very much in shadows about knowing specifics about injuries, but we can still add to our analysis of trying to gauge Josh Gordon's value, or just talk about how much more difficult or more important it would be for Josh Gordon than, say, it would be for a player who's been playing year in, year out. We know that he has an injury. What's the early word that we heard? The injury will keep him out not for days, but weeks. A quad injury, Gene. So how do we fit this extra piece of information into 4 games suspension? Hasn't played football for a year, has only played football 5-6 games over the last 3 years, and so on. What was your reaction to hearing this news on Gordon and his injury?
Yeah, I think it just fits into what we generally hear this time of year. There's going to be a certain number of players that have some sort of conditioning injury before they even come to camp. The guys that go on the non-football injury list are players that aren't going to have had their injury reported because it didn't occur during a sanctioned off-season team activity. So I think we're lucky to even have heard that it was a quad injury from the Browns. Hugh Jackson kind of coming from the Marvin Lewis school of thought, where there was not going to be a whole lot of talk about injuries anyway, and the Browns are under no obligation to give us any information at all. Thankfully, Ari Engel reminded me that Josh Gordon is going to be in the facilities during his 4-week suspension, which I thought was not going to be the case. So he'll be around a little bit, and he'll be able to rehab with the team if this does continue to be a number of weeks. I don't know that I saw any specific recovery timetable other than that my expectation was if it happened sometime this summer and he's not ready now, that sort of puts it in the 3 to 4 week plus category already, which makes you think it's mid-grade, which makes you think that it's probably in that 4 to 8 week range. Does that mean that he'll be out for the entirety of training camp? It's way too soon to know that. And what we don't know is whether or not it's sort of down toward the patellar tendon or up in the body of the muscle itself or anything along those lines. So I would imagine we'll probably get a little bit more information about Gordon as the month moves along here. It would be nice for him to get on the field with RG3 and whoever else might be competing for that quarterback job out in Cleveland. It's probably going to be Griffin, but he's a talented player. He's probably going to get through this without too much difficulty, which I hope is that he doesn't have an aggravation as he tries to recover in camp.
So, Matt, we've had this Josh Gordon situation develop before our very eyes. I'll put it to you first with the conclusion. At what round are you thinking about drafting Josh Gordon? But then show us your work and whether or not the quad injury has much to do with it or not. If you were doing a draft tomorrow, I'm going to do the Pros versus Joes draft on Monday. What's the round that you start thinking, okay, Josh Gordon is in my sights?
I was looking at 6 to 8. I drafted him a few days ago in the 8th round. I just look at it like this when it comes to the quad injury and to the time off and all of that. We'll just keep it simple. Josh Gordon, run fast. Robert Griffin, throw far. Touchdown. That's basically what you have there. I mean, really, I think that those guys have worked together enough in the past. I also think that it doesn't take much to really get timing down. I think when you are an excellent vertical receiver with a guy who can throw the ball really far, usually the issue comes when you have a quarterback who has to rely on a lot more anticipation as a thrower in the deep ball. And I don't think that you're going to have that problem with Griffin. So he may be more boom bust this year, mainly because we're looking at a situation where all of the other intermediate routes, the short routes that he's going to deal with, that's where the timing's going to come into play, the zone routes where he's going to have to, be on the same page with Griffin, and that's the thing where it's going to be dicey for him. But if you're looking at him really as what he should be, which is a boom bust wide receiver 3 with like dominant upside if everything clicks, or a bye week wide receiver 4, then I think round 7 to 8 is probably where you want him. and there are going to be people who are foolish and going to draft him somewhere between rounds 5 and 6, I think. If you have Cleveland Brown fans in your draft, then just forget it because they're going to go crazy. But if you have, if you have some rational folks, in your draft, then you can probably wait a little bit longer and nab him.
Does this move the needle at all on Corey Coleman, Gary Barnidge, Duke Johnson, even RG3 as a flyer? Did you tweak the rest of your Cleveland rankings or projections whenever this news came across the wire?
No, because Hugh Jackson tweaked those rankings for me in the spring when he signed on as their head coach. I felt a little bit more confident now that they have an offensive mind on that team, and they have one who, unlike Mike Pettin, is Mike Pettin and his three-headed backfields and deciding upon his mood who he was going to put in there, just like Rex Ryan liked to do with the Jets. I think that's over with now. It's going to be a two-headed backfield, and probably leaning towards one. And I know a lot of people are higher on Duke Johnson, but I'm higher on Isaiah Crowell, and I believe that Mary Kay Cabot's probably right about Crowell getting the first shot. And if he doesn't screw it up, which there's probably a good 60% chance that something weird will happen, then he could be in for a 1,200-yard season and be a nice surprise.
Not Terrell Watson.
Not Terrell Watson, unless they strap a compass that beeps on the back of his hind parts so that he knows where the hole is, because he is analytics gone off the rails when it comes to him. I mean, there's lots of great analytics out there, but that's a case where someone looked at his workout times and didn't watch the film, or doesn't understand what a running scheme is, because neither does he.
Ooh, strong words. Strong words. Well, strong news. Maybe, I think, when we look back at all the news we got in the first opening days here, and we're going to get more, maybe when we look back, the most significant piece of news that we've gotten this week is the news on Jordy Nelson. And, Gene, obviously, we're still in a wide range of meanings of this news on Jordy Nelson's good knee, not the ACL knee. But again, when you heard this, what was your first reaction? And I guess, what are you looking for? At what point will you start to say, okay, now I'm concerned?
Week or two, probably. We know that the Packers medical staff tends to be on the more conservative side. Jordy Nelson called it a hiccup. Mike McCarthy, in the Packers general manager, I think Ted Thompson also said that this wasn't going to be a long-term situation, that all the guys that were on the PUP list are expected to come off pretty quickly in Green Bay. So if we see this linger into, past Hall of Fame week, a week or two into camp, where he's still not off the PUP list, or we're hearing that he's not doing much on the side at all, that he's not even visible or dressed to do anything off to the side in camp, then I think we have to be concerned that there's something a little bit more to this tendonitis. As we didn't get a whole lot more specifics about it in terms of whether or not this happened. He says it was a compensatory thing. The Packers are saying it's a compensatory thing as he tried to recondition after his ACL injury, but that's not a new thing. That's been a number of period of time here. So it's hard to know exactly what to make of this. But I think it's something you have to be concerned about, because they were treating him carefully through OTAs and mini camps, but he was dressed in shoulder pads. He was running routes off to the side with Aaron Rodgers. They weren't really treating him with kid gloves at all. So it was a little bit of a surprise when he wasn't ready to go in camp, even though the Packers are a little bit conservative. So it's not surprising that something else happened. But does this mean that he's likely to have a patellar tendon issue for the rest of the year? It's really hard to know. If that's the type of tendonitis it is, and there's more than one tendon around the knee, these things are things that can linger. So you hope that you see him return within a week to 10 days at the latest. If not, I think we're going to have to start. Then you have to ease at that point week to week instead of day to day, and the level of concern has to change. But I don't think it's time to panic yet. But it would be nice to see him out there proving that he's over his ACL injury sooner than later.
Matt, how much of a chill, or did it even send a chill? I'll say it sent a chill through me, because Jordy Nelson showed that he actually is the keystone of that offense. That stone in the arch. Those of you who don't know your 13 colonies history, that's why Pennsylvania is the keystone state. You take the keystone out of the arch and the arch falls apart. So this is not just about Jordy Nelson's fantasy value. It's about the whole Green Bay offense. We have Dr. Gene Fillingson on the medical side, but whether it's a hiccup or not, for this early on, we want our ACL recoveries to be smooth. So how much are you calling Jordy Nelson, or even for that matter, the Green Bay offense's rankings and their projections tentative until we see Nelson show affirmatively that he's over this?
I'm holding steady on Nelson because, I mean, unless I missed something that Gene said, because I'm looking at on Twitter that Josh Zimmer said that the Hasselbeck brothers ranked the best quarterbacks by divisions, and they must have looked at this Jordy Nelson thing and decided to drop Aaron Rodgers to third in the division in terms of how they ranked them. They ranked Cutler, Stafford, Rodgers, and Bridgewater, unless they just did it in reverse order and had a real big favoritism towards Teddy. But I don't. So anyway, I'm just kind of mind-boggled by that.
They're just launching the career as the Hasselbeck brothers, like a comedy duo.
Yeah, what was that brothers combo that we saw?
Smothers Brothers?
No, it was like in the 80s, like two muscle-bound guys. No, I'm not that old.
Hans and Franz?
No, the Corsican brothers. Yeah, I was thinking they were like the Corsican brothers. Maybe that's what they are. But see, Gene likes the Corsican brothers.
Cheech and Chong? You mean the Cheech and Chong movie?
No. See what I'm saying? If you haven't heard of them, that's exactly the point. So, when I'm talking about, I guess getting back to Jordy Nelson here is, to me, if it's a compensatory type of a deal, and his ACL, he feels like he would have been ready just when you isolate the ACL. He would have been ready this spring to play a game. I think the compensatory part is probably good news he's having it now as opposed to later, and that by the time you kind of work your way up into the season, hopefully he'll be more than ready and he won't have that compensatory issue that most usually have when everybody says, oh yeah, I'm ready to go. Season starts, pulled hamstring, out for 2 weeks, ankle strain, out for 2 more weeks, and they're like, oh, well, you were ready? Not really, but, I was at 85%. It sounds to me like that Jordy Nelson, I'd rather have him go through this now because he knows how to run a route. The rest of those guys don't, so this might even actually help the offense that he's not going to be in there right now because he and Aaron Rodgers have enough rapport. He's enough of a pro to be where he needs to be. Devontae Adams needs all the help he can get figuring out on the map what he needs to do, and then you have to look at Jeff Janis, who's still learning how to run good routes and catch the ball consistently. If one of those two guys can do enough to beat out Jared Abbrederis, who obviously knows how to get there, you might have yourself a decent Green Bay passing game in the way that we've always expected them to be paired with Nelson and Cobb.
So, Gene, really quickly, Matt did not mention Ty Montgomery, and I just want to ask you really quickly, because we got something from Jason Hirschhorn today that cleared things up a little bit on Ty Montgomery, who was injured somewhat early in the season last year and is not on the field yet. No target date for return either with this ankle. He said, one injury, a misdiagnosis, and a surgery to clean it up. And they said he should return before the season starts. But when I say those words, and we know that Ty Montgomery was injured, 10 months ago or 9 months ago, is that meaningful to you? I mean, we're looking at his long-term career and things like this, because this is not something that fits our typical injury, surgery, return. Does that set off any alarm bells for you?
I didn't see that note. So first reaction would be misdiagnosis around the foot and ankle with a surgery to correct later. Those things in the past have tended to be kind of all along the lines of maybe a high ankle sprain that wasn't diagnosed right away, or a Liz Frank injury that was a little bit of a problem. So there's smaller bones within the ankle that can be broken and maybe not picked up well. But generally, and more recently, those are all injuries that get picked up at some point because the index of suspicion for the team medical staffs is so high, and especially in Green Bay, as we've talked about before. So I'm not really sure what to put on that. I think any misdiagnosis makes you concerned because it raises the question of whether or not you're looking at an injury that has a poor blood supply, and is it something that can be recovered from? So if there's not a timetable for his recovery, is it something that involves some cartilage? Did he have to have microfracture surgery around the ankle? And I'm just freely speculating here.
No, of course.
But Yes, it definitely raises suspicion not only immediately but for his long-term career. If we're at this point and there's no timetable generally, no matter what procedure that needs to be done, and there's some sort of timetable associated with it. So it's possible that the Packers just aren't including us in that discussion. They have a sense of what the timetable is, and we're just not hearing what it is. But it's also possible they're just not really sure where he's going to be and how long he's going to come back, and the end is more nebulous than the beginning.
And what obviously raises our attention at first is it seems like whatever the injury was and the surgery, at least adding the misdiagnosis gives us a reason why this much later he's still not playing. But as you said, we're missing a key piece of information. On a related note, another thing that just comes across the wire from Twitter, from Matthew Fairburn. I mean, there was something about Sammy Watkins playing pickup basketball, and he now, Matthew Fairburn on Twitter said that he ran into Sammy Watkins today, and he told him, X-ray show his foot is healed, still doesn't know when he's going to practice. When I say those words to you, Dr. Gene, because we're making decisions, drafts are going to be starting. Is it not safe to draft him at ADP until we see him back on the practice field?
I think all three of these guys, Brian Edelman and Watkins, and you can throw Jared Cook and a couple of these other guys that have had these metatarsal fracture surgeries, it would be nice to see them fully recovered and working their way through the reconditioning phase before you feel 100% comfortable about them. I think that's just as likely. Sammy Watkins saying that is probably just means I don't know when the team is going to clear me. I feel okay. I could potentially go in the next couple of days, or they could hold me out, as so many of these other players are being held out on PUP for a brief period of time until they're very comfortable with my conditioning, that everything is symmetric and I'm not compensating in ways that I don't even realize. That's probably all that's going on there. But it is interesting that they felt compelled to do repeated x-rays to see, and that probably is more standard than we expect, especially with these revision situations. They want to make sure that the screw is in place and that the bone is healing around that area, and there aren't any other subtle signs of that the bone needs to continue to heal before they put him back out there and risk another setback similar to the one that he had last year. So so many of these guys, you call them day to day, you can call them week to week. I think very similar to what we went through with Alshon Jeffrey last year. The closer that day-to-day becomes week-to-week, the more concerned we need to be.
And really quickly going back to Jordy Nelson, because I forgot to mention this too, what I'm worried about with Jordy Nelson is if this isn't just a blip, a hiccup, as it was called, if he's not back out on the field in, say, 2, 3, 4 days, and this is a week-to-week thing, as Dr. Gene was saying, why should I believe that once he's back on the field that it won't come up again, or otherwise you have some other compensation, or I just don't want to see him, especially at this, he's 31, not decrepit by NFL terms, but and we'll get to this when we talk about Ryan Mathews. You just don't. I don't want to be spending picks on players at ADP that assume them performing at or near their ceiling whenever we already see something. And I know some people are probably starting to run numbers on the players that are injured in the preseason hitting their ADP or outproducing it versus players that aren't. And I don't think the numbers are going to look good for players that were hurt in the preseason. So moving right along, I will go back to Sammy Watkins, Matt. Let's say Sammy Watkins is cleared to practice, Monday, and everything is good. Is he a target for you? If you have to spend a third-round pick on Sammy Watkins, or even a late second-round pick on Sammy Watkins, is Sammy Watkins? We know you're a fan. Are you a fan for fantasy?
Yeah, I've got something to say about the Nelson thing too, just the Nelson and the Watkins thing. I remember a time when guys just tried to get away from being in training camp, especially veterans. Yeah. I also remember a time where coaches probably, and pretend this hat is made out of tinfoil, because certainly I know that there's a lot of Georgia fans out there who have hats made out of tinfoil for the idea that they think that Kirby Smart is going to take them to a national championship when our man Saban is still there in Alabama. But anyway, so pretend this is the tinfoil hat. My tinfoil hat tells me that some of these coaches really want to give more reps to certain players that need more reps with the quarterback, need more opportunities out on in training camp to see where they are with them before the big gun comes in and gets the opportunity to play. And they know that veteran probably wouldn't mind having a little bit of rest, and they don't want to tell the media that training camp's a little overrated in certain respects. They don't want to tell anybody that type of thing. But I mean, if they do that, that could be trouble. So why not say, yeah, that existing injury that's been going on for a while, we've got a little bump in the road here. We got a little bump here in the road. We're not going to clear him just yet. We're not going to do this. Oh, we have a little compensatory issue in that realm, and let guys practice a little bit more, because we know that Aaron Rodgers is probably going to do something crazy if one of those young guys have to get on the field again and can't run a route to save their life. And you look at the Bills situation, and it's a similar thing. They got Desmond Lewis, and Robert Woods is back. Are they going to use either of those guys? If Colby Listenby can get healthy enough, they liked what they saw out of him early on in OTAs. Maybe, Sammy, let him rest a little bit more, because, I mean, shoot, we went from last year talking about how bad of a route runner he was after that first year because of the coaching staff not really teaching him the way that they wanted to teach him, when he was a hell of a route runner at Clemson, even though they didn't use him as much as they needed to in all the ways that they could have with the route tree. And lo and behold, he's a potential Pro Bowl player second year, because it takes so long. It doesn't take that long to learn how to run routes. I mean, Jeff Janis and Devontae Adams have been around longer than Watkins has, or just as long, and they're still trying to figure it out. So, again, being sarcastic about that, I sometimes look at that and think, yeah, I'll take Sammy Watkins now. I bumped him up once he said he was running at full speed. I felt good about that. I'm ready to go.
Okay, let's talk about somebody who's not running at full speed right now, Doc. Josh Doctson. Achilles issue. And I think in one of the things I read about this today, Kevin White was mentioned as just a specter. And when we hear Achilles, we always pause. Now, he was reported with the Achilles issue a few months ago, still out with the Achilles issue. It doesn't sound like there are any outward indications that it's a serious Achilles issue, but we still have to take this on its face, and we'll talk about this with Kenneth Dixon too, where I do think with rookies, we are looking at an increased importance for these practices and these reps. Now, Odell Beckham, who is another player we would mention as someone who got off to a slow start, would say, ha, to that. If you can play, you can play. I don't practice. Who need to practice? Talking about practice.
Training camp.
Training camp. You talk about training camp. But, in Dockson's case, there are two very accomplished receivers ahead of him in Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson. So that factors in this a little bit. But again, give us, from the medical standpoint, with a little bit of fantasy insight to frame it, what your reaction was to hearing this.
Yeah, those are the two wide receivers that I put into my update today with all the pup guys that we're talking about, knowing that there have been rookie wide receivers that have struggled to make it through their first preseason healthy. Odell Beckham being one with a hamstring injury that, Grandpa Tom Coughlin was saying it's not that big a deal, and then it turned out to be an 8 to 12 week injury only for him to come back and set the world on fire, which he's still doing now. And then Kevin White, whose stress reaction became a fracture that needed to be fixed, and we never saw him again. And it's way too early to say on which side of those spectrums we're going to see Josh Doctson be. But with any tendon injury, Achilles or patella or some of those other ones, that's the reason we're a little bit worried about Jordy Nelson too. It's a concerning situation. And it's concerning that it's been going on since May, whatever point in May, being at mid-May, late May, whenever the Washington minicamp was, that they aren't happy with how it's healed yet. And that may not mean that much. That may just mean that he's still having a little bit of soreness and stiffness. It was mentioned specifically when he wakes up in the morning. They were confident enough in how he's doing to allow him to work off to the side for trainers today and put him through some footwork drills. So that's a reassuring situation. But it tells you that it's either a very slow healing tendon strain or it's something that's lingered for a while. And either one of those things make it very difficult to say, well, it's probably just going to be another couple of days versus weeks or longer, or something that's going to put him at high risk for another injury, whether it be an Achilles tendon situation or something else. But they seem to be treating him day to day, so I think we can treat him day to day. But like so many of these other players we talked about tonight, I think we consider him week to week because he's a rookie, because of the depth chart situation, and because there's absolutely no reason at the end of July to put him in a situation where he might have a setback like Beckham or White did that costs him well into well into the regular season. So we may see this be a little bit closer to Devontae Parker's situation last year as he recovered from his foot injury than what those other two guys were. But like so many of these other guys, Doctson would be a guy that Washington would really want to see in as many preseason games as possible. So if we're missing multiple preseason games and he's not able to get back to consecutive practices, then I think we have to be concerned. Regardless, this isn't a good deal for him, knowing that they want to get him out there and see what's going on because of those guys that he needs to beat out in front of him. And there's already been plenty of discussion that Jamison Crowder is going to see more playing time than Doctson. And you guys have talked in the last couple of weeks that that's not really a valid situation because they're playing two different positions anyway. But that's something that's come up in the local Washington media. So you don't like tendon strains this time of year. It's a setup for trouble. So go ahead and take as much time to get him back as possible. But the longer this lingers away from the time of the original injury, the more concerned we have to be that it's just not going to happen for him earlier in the season. And it's going to have to be something that he works through and tries to find enough reps to assert himself to where he gets some more playing time as the season goes along.
Matt, I want to ask you about... I want to spin this question a little bit because you were never the biggest Kirk Cousins fan. And now we've had a half a season of excellent production from Kirk Cousins. Whether or not he gets Josh Doctson, he has Jordan Reed, Pierre Garçon, he has Deshaun Jackson. He has arguably a running game that's going to put the onus of the offense on him again. Are you dipping your toe in the Kirk Cousins waters at all this year? And if you want to add anything on Doctson and how this is affecting your rating of him, I'm just curious. I want to check in, take your temperature on Kirk Cousins right now.
Well, I'm still waiting to see a full season's worth of work. I'm not totally convinced he obviously has played better. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and it goes to show you more than anything that you can take a guy who's a borderline starter backup prospect and give him enough reps in and out of games to develop him, and he's going to get better rather than throwing him directly into the fire. Like I like to say, there are only a handful of guys that handle the direct heat of the fire really well. Most of them could go this Kirk Cousins route where there was really no expectation for him to ever really be the starter other than fans who just didn't like RG3. So when you look at this, I think that he's worthwhile as one of your quarterback by committee guys. I mean, you can get him after round 10. Why not? You're gonna, you can pair him with another player that works out. And Josh Doctson, they don't need Josh Doctson right now. I think Josh Doctson is to put, is the future so that they can get rid of Deshaun Jackson as soon as possible once Doctson shows a little something, or get rid of Pierre Garçon. I think that those two guys, are wearing thin probably in Washington in terms of, either age or however they feel like usage should be and consistency.
At a high price tag. I mean, that's the other part of the equation.
Exactly. So Doctson isn't a this year guy anyway. I mean, it's a nice to have this year guy, and they're going to tell you all they want that. Well, we want guys to produce right away. That's, there's no redshirt season in the NFL. Yeah, okay, fine. There's lots of evidence where that's not true. But keep saying that, and that's fine. That's all well and good. But Doctson doesn't need to be healthy as long as Deshaun Jackson and Jordan Reed can stay healthy, which are tangible ifs, actually, when you look at their careers. After the 15th round, sure, I'll take a stab at Josh Doctson, at that point, but not before.
Yeah, much like the other Josh we already talked about, Josh Gordon. You're just drafting talent, and we play fantasy football for long enough in the second half of your draft, or at least after you get your starting lineup filled out. You take talent and let the chips fall where they may. And I do want to point out that Kirk Cousins did get in. Remember, he came in cold off the bench late in his rookie year against Baltimore and made some plays to win that Baltimore game.
He did.
Played the next week against your Cleveland Browns, Matt, and played very, very well. Now, we were saying, hey, it's the Kyle Shanahan system and all these things, but he did show a little bit of a glimmer there.
Well, Bruce Gradkowski did too. So, yeah. It's the same type of deal. I mean, I'm just waiting for Derek Anderson, Scott Mitchell, the list go, Nick Foles.
Sure.
Well, I'm just waiting to see.
Nick Foles is looking for Nick. We got an extra spot on the podcast. You had a good conversation today, Matt, about Nick Foles as a TV personality. Would you welcome him to the Audible booth?
Yeah, as long as we could haze him. We just need to need to strap him to the goalpost and have Gene Bramwell tell him jokes.
Yeah, just like we do to Matt Harmon. I want to give everyone a word from our other sponsor, Football Guys Players Championship. 2016 Football Guys Players Championship drafts kicked off. Going to be going through September 8th. Features a $250,000 grand prize, more than $1.8 million in total prizes. Championship round paying down to 650th place out of a contest capped at 6,900 teams. All prizes guaranteed, entire prize pool escrowed. Remember, if you win your league of 12 teams, you get 1,500 for first place. If you come in second, 500, and then that gets you into the championship round. Drafts will be running through kickoff on September 8th. $350 to enter. $1,000 will get you 3 teams, save $50 there. And if you do draft early, again, training camp just getting underway, you feel like you have that edge, and if you wait, all the information starts to get disseminated. People see these things. You lose that edge. You can draft now, and if you're worried about things that happen between now and the beginning of the season, they've added 2 preseason free agency processes. September 2nd and 7th, you have a chance to pick up the hot free agent or otherwise make any adjustments you need before the season starts in the Football Guys Players Championship. Gene, I want to bring up Ladarius Green. Ladarius Green starting camp on the PUP, but also I want to remind people, I want you to remind people about how what we are seeing about Ladarius Green now may affect the calculus of how to figure out when it is time to draft or how much Tyler Eifert's stock will be hurt. So we have information on Ladarius Green that may or may not have been unexpected. You can tell me whether you were all surprised by that. But again, just reminding people where we stand or what we don't know and what we have to be open to with Tyler Eifert.
I don't think we know anything about either one of these guys, really, other than they had ankle surgery. And yeah, I think this is informative only than, what we do know is that it almost always takes NFL players longer to come back from these ankle surgeries, going back to Jonathan Stewart and Cam Newton and many other players over the years, than what we expected them to or what their reported timetable is initially. And we've seen Tyler Eifert's timetable go from 6 weeks to 6 to 8 to 8 to 10, and now we don't know if he's going to be ready for week 1 of the regular season, and maybe it's going to extend a couple of games in. So these guys are month to month rather than week to week, and we don't even know when Ladarius Green's surgery was. We know that the Steelers were comfortable enough with him early on in free agency in March to go ahead and sign him, and we think that the surgery happened in January, and if that's the case, we're going on 6 months now, at least, of his recovery, which is, again, we hear 3 to 4 months, but 4 to 6 months until they're really ready to go is not out of the question. Is this another situation where they're allowing a veteran player, in this case, Ladarius Green has not been with the Steelers, and he needs to learn the offense a little bit. Are they letting a veteran player who is close to recovering spend a few extra days with the training staff to make absolutely sure that everybody is comfortable with his conditioning so he can get back into contact practices? Or is there something more going on? I don't know that there's more going on here, even though we don't have specific information. They signed him early. He didn't look like he was having any trouble, and he was allowed to weight bear throughout the offseason. Every time somebody talked to him or shot a picture of him in May and June, there weren't any issues. And there's not been any indication from the team that there's something more to worry about. And the Steelers are on the side of the ledger where we don't hear much about what's going on. But this is probably a situation where no news is mostly good news. Again, not knowing what the length of the timetable for recovery should be, I'm not too worried about it, but he's another player that you definitely like to see out there getting reps with Ben Roethlisberger sooner than later.
Matt, when I bring up Tyler Eifert, do you think buying opportunity, is he the kind of player that you're willing to absorb lost weeks and maybe a week or two that you're not sure if you're ready to start him yet? So you might have him, if you're going with a later tight end strategy, maybe you start out the season with an even later tight end than that in your draft, knowing that Eifert can come on and upgrade you at the position. Is he attractive to you as one of those possibilities that, hey, he's not there for you at the beginning of the season, but if he's there for you at the end of the season, you'll be glad you took him in the 7th, 8th, 9th round?
If there weren't so many other tight ends who fit that description this year, I would say yes. But when you add the injury component into it, you add the fact that he still drops his share of passes, and you add the fact that they've lost, they've lost one offensive mind, and they've lost, two of their better wide receivers. I look at it as he might have more attention paid to him, a little more pressure put on him. I'd like to see him be able to respond to that. I'm not totally saying that just because he had a gold helmet on his head in college that made him automatically a world beater. And so I look at this, and I'd rather take a chance on guys later. I'd rather take chances on guys like Eric Ebron. Rather take a chance on Martellus Bennett. I'd be fine with Antonio Gates for another year.
Oh, yeah.
So no, the answer is absolutely not.
And I would tend to agree with that, just because, as you said, it's the relative abundance of tight end options that you look at what they represent, you look at the cost, and you think that's a pretty good proposition. Gene, let's go back to some more injury news coming out here, and not necessarily injury news in this case with Mike Wallace, but if you were looking at Mike Wallace as a late round flyer, or otherwise you're looking at Mike Wallace as a potential component to the value of Kamar Aiken, are you falling on the side of minimizing this and saying, conditioning test veteran, I know, and Matt Waldman has to hold his nose, or are you saying, look, this is a sign, or this is something we need to interpret in the context of Mike Wallace at this point in his career, and it's something that you should take notice of if you're projecting Mike Wallace's potential impact this year?
Both. I don't think it's a big deal. I think players generally come off the conditioning list pretty quickly, or the NFI list if they fail the conditioning test pretty quickly, but I would like Matt Waldman to give us his impression of Ozzie Newsome when he got the news that, that Mike Wallace...
$4.5 million. $4.5 million guaranteed for this. What would your impression be, Matt?
My impression would be when I'm watching The Wire again recently, and you know the term house cat? It's appropriate for Baltimore. Well, there you go. House cat. There you go. That's what Mike Wallace is now. He's a house cat now.
Yeah. Just know that the Ravens are every bit as frustrated as you guys are if you were hoping for Mike Wallace to amount to something this year.
Yeah.
And happy when this went down, I'm sure.
I'm very happy this went down.
And I appreciate, Matt, I want to say I appreciate this as a Steelers fan, because, of course, Steelers fans are loving this. As a Steelers fan, that you can see it from the football universe karma standpoint necessarily, and not from the anti-Steelers. I'm glad to know that you're not that obsessed with hating the Steelers.
No, I mean the Steelers and the Browns are like brothers who fight all the time. Mm-hmm. But then when that neighbor, the Ravens, come around and they move into town and steal like one of the brothers' stuff, then both hate on them.
Yeah, but when they steal the lawnmower and then they try to start the lawnmower, it explodes. We're pretty happy about that. Let's talk really quickly, Gene, Kenneth Dixon, because we now have a grade 1 MCL. So now we actually have some hard information that we can project a return to play. And again, as a rookie, and if those of you on the Justin Forsett train, Justin Forsett with the chip on his shoulder, as he always has had, this, I would say, necessarily helps Justin Forsett. Because, again, with the rookie, the increased importance of these reps, the increased importance of these practices, now we have an idea of how much time Kenneth Dixon will miss with this MCL sprain.
Yeah, and remember, especially with running backs, when you hear low grade, you don't necessarily think of a big concern, and you'll generally hear sort of 10 to 14 days as a routine recovery timetable. But this is one of those injuries where the range of expectation is really wide around that narrow estimate that you get. So some players we see come back in 3 to 7 days, some players we see come back in 3 to 4 weeks. So it's going to be very dependent on how he feels and how much the Ravens are willing to push him. So I don't think it's all that worrisome, and they're not likely to push him very hard knowing that Justin Forsett is running in the stable ready to go. Lorenzo Taliaferro, I don't know what chance he has to make the roster necessarily, but he's also on the list waiting to be activated. So I don't think they're going to feel pressure to give Dixon reps early in camp. They're going to allow him to heal, and it would be nice to make sure that if this truly is a low-grade injury, as everybody expects it to be, and Rappaport said it shouldn't be a long-term deal at all, that we see him back in advance of the first training camp game, first preseason game, so he can get some reps then.
It's going to be Terrence West, right? I'm going to make Matt crack up again. It's going to be Terrence West. Terrence West, I think, is like the backup to Justin Forsett at the beginning of the season. He's been hanging around.
Yeah, he's that guy who fell down the stairs in The Wire to get his job. He's that or Presbalewski. I think he might be Presbalewski.
Oh, then he gets an honorable outcome of becoming a school teacher. So there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with being Presbalewski. Matt, we have to do an entire wire-based. I think we talked about once doing an article.
We did. I did a wire gut check.
You did the
one
wire
time.
gut check.
I did players, but we'll have to reprise it again at some point.
Of course, and we're talking about Ballmer, so this is why the wire has to be involved in this talk here. A little further up, I think that there's a point in the wire when they go up to Philadelphia, and what like Garrison Keillor is on, and then Bodie is like, "This is what the radio is like."
Yeah, they're completely confused by that. Maybe Riley Cooper's Garrison Keillor. I don't know.
Yeah. This is what the radio is like in Philadelphia. Well, is this what Ryan Mathews is like in Philadelphia? Matt, I'm going to toss this one to you first because when you and I talked about this off channel through DMs and Twitter, you had a similar reaction to me in the sense that, about other players, maybe we would look at an coming into camp with an ankle injury, putting you on the NFI, saying, well, let's wait and see. With Ryan Mathews, this feels more ominous.
Yeah, it absolutely does, because it's just one of those deals where this guy's, you don't want to say he's snake bit as much as it is that he's had so many bouts of immaturity in San Diego. He basically ruined his chance to be a 5, 6, 7 year feature back who could have been mentioned in the same breath as guys like Matt Forte. He had that kind of ability, and he wasted it. He partied too much. He didn't show up in shape. He thought that he could coast on his talent, and then when things went wrong, he went into a shell. And he had some nice moments with Philadelphia right now. Last year, but now when you take a look at the situation, you have to understand that it just seems like that football's not cut out for him, not in the way that he could have been in terms of top ability. So it's a touch and go situation. We had a dynasty draft, a mock draft with the staff yesterday, and Ryan Mathews dropped so far, it was unbelievable. I mean, past guys, you would think he'd be in the same range as guys like DeMarco Murray or Latavius Murray, guys who are probably on their way out of the league, then closer to being on the way in. And Mathews dropped well below that, even in a dynasty startup, beyond guys like even Matt Forte, who people say thinks he's on death's door with his career. So, when I look at this situation, it doesn't look great. But then again, for the Eagles, it doesn't look great either, unless you're just happy for the fact that Carson Wentz is going to get himself a top running back next year to support that offense and keep him from being too much pressure put on him, because they're probably going to be drafting very early.
So I don't know if we've talked about him, and viewers, listeners, forgive me if I've already asked Matt this question, or Cecil has in recent weeks, but does Wendell Smallwood interest you at all? Are you reserving him?
No.
He
can catch. Yeah, he can catch, and I think he has enough ability that he might be able to. He has enough ability that pick him at the end of the draft, hope that you get something good. But I think that he's like,
he's a guy that you take if you get him in a draft, and then you have like one game where he catches 7 balls for 60 yards and a touchdown, and has like 10 carries for 33 yards. Then you trade him.
Yeah, he's a little better than Kenyon Barner.
Well, and hey, that's one of his competitors on the depth chart. Really quickly too, just because he's been getting a little more buzz. Josh Ferguson, is he roughly in the same category as Smallwood, or is there something more there?
Maybe a little bit better there. I liked what he was able to. He's much better in open space, but I do think that Robert Irsay is being Robert Irsay, and that's a little bit premature. When Pagano goes like, "Look, we like what we saw in shorts, we like what we saw, and but let's wait till we get this guy in pads." And when you get him in pads, my concern is, again, ability to make good decisions between the tackles and to be able to actually break tackles, which was something that I was a little concerned about with him at Illinois. But space player could be very good in space, and they need somebody like that. So the Sproles role makes some sense, except for that Sproles could break tackles.
And Sproles is still there, too. But Sproles' role in Indy, maybe, if we're talking Ferguson. Sorry, I'm crossing my wires here. Really quickly, speaking of crossing wires, let's actually, instead of crossing wires, go back. Gene, I guess this is a time for you to, let's watch the blood pressure the reading now, to go back over the idea of the term injury prone and whether it applies to Ryan Mathews and whether it means we should interpret this ankle injury different than we might for another player who does not have his history?
You were reading my mind. My comment was going to be, you know how much I dislike the term injury prone. But if you cannot go for a jog 1 week before training camp without rolling your ankle, you might be injury prone.
Is this where you do the Jeff Foxworthy? We need to get Gene doing Jeff Foxworthy.
If you can't go out for a jog, you might be injury prone. Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know. I mean, he's not going to be on the NFI list for long, but this is another one where if you could see inside the Eagles medical room and and see how they're going over their depth chart, the first, the 90 players and how they're going to, and Ryan Mathews comes in with an ace wrap on limping, and you ask, well, what happened to you? Well, I twisted my ankle when I was jogging.
Well, the entire B-side of your album could be Darren McFadden.
And I have no idea why Hank Hill just walked in impersonating Ryan Mathews.
That's all right. We're working.
Ryan Mathews might be selling propane if it goes this concern rate.
And propane accessories.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this point, I feel.
That was from Paulette, by the way.
I was gonna say, I feel bad. I feel bad that she's not here, because this is the point where we need Alicia to walk in right behind you, Matt, and correct all of us. Like, if you're gonna be talking about King of the Hill, then we need a real expert. Although King of the Hill, very underrated show, and I'm not just saying that because I live in Texas.
No, it's a great show, and yeah, but I mean, if you want to see Rain Man do the version of, instead of Wapner and go Hank, then just wait till about 7:59 at my house, and you'll hear that if I've got the TV on another channel.
We have, before y'all change the channel, we've got a few minutes here. Let's we've wound up, I think, the biggest, or the news that we need to at least check ourselves on the injury front. A couple other things from this week. Anquan Boldin, Matt. A lot of pieces here, a lot of moving parts, but we know now that he got $750,000 guaranteed on a $2.75 million contract. He's going to be on the opening day roster. We project this offense with Anquan Boldin. It isn't so much, in my mind, about Anquan Boldin's value, which, I mean, maybe at some point he'll be a bye-week injury emergency filler. It isn't so much about Matthew Stafford's value, which I think is up. You have to say this helps Matthew Stafford. It's about all those other guys. Or is it? Is there enough here to look? You mentioned Eric Ebron. He's one of the first names that comes to mind. How do we look at the ripple effect of the Boldin signing in Detroit?
I think the ripple effect is this. If they probably looked at their tight end depth chart and realized that if Eric Ebron doesn't get it done, they don't have anybody at tight end. And while we know that Anquan Boldin is not a tight end, he kind of plays one in real life in the zones over the middle. And it also gives him a little bit more of a presence in the red zone because he's a smart player in that area of the field. And they've lost Calvin Johnson, a guy who's able to make those type of jump ball plays, rugged types of plays in the red area, and that's where a veteran like Boldin is really going to come into play for them, in a way that maybe, we like Golden Tate, some of us like Marvin Jones, some of us like Theo Riddick, but I think the guy that's really going to, the two guys that are probably going to suffer a little bit, if at all, if Boldin is a major player in this offense, and when I mean major for fantasy purposes, a bye-week option, then right, you're probably looking at Theo Riddick seeing his touches suffer out of the backfield if they still have Eric Ebron on the field. It just means that they feel like that Boldin just is a little bit of a smarter, wiser player who can mesh well with Stafford on pre-snap reads.
Would you say, and this is my stance at this point, Matt, that if we're talking about the over-under in the sense of what the Lions plan on doing with Anquan Boldin and then what they end up doing with him, because even at 36 years old, he's still Anquan Boldin, I'm betting the over. I'm saying that once Anquan Boldin is on the field and part of this offense, he's going to be harder to get off the field. Would you tend to agree with that, or is this more like an Andre Johnson situation? Well, not so fast. Let's wait and see what he has before we even say he's going to have any kind of stable role in this offense.
I'm kind of there because last year in San Francisco seemed a little underwhelming to me. And I know that he did well, I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where it seemed like that, oh, wow, even at his slower pace, there was something there. But I thought a lot of that had to do, again, with they used him in that tight end role. So if they're using him as a glorified tight end, then the answer is I'm a little more inclined to agree with you, Bloom. If they're going to use him as a pure slot guy or think they can use him somehow outside, then we're looking at Hakeem Nicks, Andre Johnson.
And Hakeem Nicks, actually, New Orleans, and let's all say it together, right? Full speed ahead on Michael Thomas. Now that Anquan Boldin did not end up in New Orleans, so Michael Thomas is definitely a rookie now on the way up. That if his competition is Hakeem Nicks for early snaps, then we know how that. Hakeem Nicks, you were beautiful. You used to be so beautiful.
Fantastic. The receiver I wanted the Titans to draft over Kenny Britt. I was so mad about that.
Compartment syndrome. Oh man, that was it.
Yeah, but now there's no receiver, including Brandon Cooks, who's probably going to be able to cut in front of him on the path to Drew Brees, because we've heard about how he attaches to his quarterback like a remora eel to a shark or a suckerfish, not a remora eel.
Barnacle. On the bottom of a boat. We're going to get into breaking up
off the rails.
SpongeBob SquarePants at some point here. Last item, and this has been something where there's been like some consternation about this. I don't want to get into the truthers, but there has been. I don't want to say David Johnson truthers, but there's been a bit of almost like an allergic reaction every time there's any suggestion whatsoever that David Johnson's going to be anything but a true feature back player getting easily 325 touches, 270 carries, 50 receptions, a centerpiece player in the Arizona offense. We have now today Bruce Arians saying, on David Johnson's workload, that'll be game to game. If he's hot, he's staying in there, but there's no script right now. Matt, is this the kind of piece that you're chuckling already? Is this the kind of piece that you say, if this even causes you to pause when you look at David Johnson's stock, then you're just not paying attention, and you should just listen? Bruce Arians. Now, I want to say Bruce Arians is a straight shooter, as NFL coaches go. And he did say, this is like Barry Jackson from Miami Herald saying, Arian Foster will be the starter if he stays completely healthy. Well, you buried the lead there. So the lead there, like, as long as he's hot, he's going to be the guy. Well, did you watch him last year? David Johnson will be hot. Or did you already have a little bit of pause about David Johnson in the first round? Does this matter at all, or is this me taking our last few minutes up with something that is meaningless?
Well, I mean, if there was a David Johnson truther on our staff, I was the closest to it, because I was the one who rated him, at the bottom end of the top 10 when everybody else had him in the top, 5 to 6 overall. And my rationale was, I'm probably going to bump him up the closer we get to the season, but I want to make people think about Chris Johnson and Andre Ellington, mostly Chris Johnson at that stage, because of the fact that we had an intern with the linebacking core who's a former running back herself, and Jen Welter talk about the Senior Bowl with Cecil, Jean, and I there, that the team felt like that Chris Johnson was a more patient running back and a more consistent running back, and played better in terms of what they expected to be done in the offense than what David Johnson did. As great as Johnson was as an athlete and what he did making big plays, which obviously count for a ton when you look at the scenario. So what I wanted to put into play with there is, if you heard from the Cardinals say, we may use multiple backs, we may go with a hot hand approach at times, then it's worthwhile to look at David Johnson and not automatically coronate him as the next stud running back in your top 3 to 5, and maybe he should be a guy that you pick at the bottom half of the first round, because there may be some games where maybe third and shorts he screws it up. Maybe there's some plays where he's not all that patient, as Kean Fahey showed in his comparison between Gurley and Johnson in terms of patience and running style and understanding blocking schemes. So with that in mind, if there's a consistency factor or he blows something on a third down that puts the team behind because this was a pivotal situation, they may go with one of these other two backs and decide that they want to roll with them, and they're fine with that, even though the yards per carry is smaller, even though they don't have the big explosive potential that David Johnson has, but because they're a passing offense first and foremost, and they want to stay on schedule with their offense so that they don't get Carson Palmer killed. So when I look at this situation, I'm happy with taking him between the 7th and 10th spots in the first round, but I'm still a little bit wary. And when I hear Bruce Arians kind of hedge his bets and say, yeah, he's the feature back, but we'll go with the hot hand, that tells me that they're waiting and seeing, and they want to see him be consistent in situations that are important, which are short yardage situations, third down situations, and things that actually dictate game script and game plan more than just blowing off a 50-yard run.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not taking David Johnson in the first round. There's any number of ins and outs to that, but Bruce Arians is a coach that has a history, and maybe he hasn't had a talent like David Johnson that he was playing less than people expected to or think he should. But we have seen him play less explosive, less talented at the point in their career they were at, running backs they put them on the bench. He's put them on the bench for, Rashard Mendenhall, or running backs that are more dependable. I can't remember exactly how our good friend Eric Stoner put it, but this idea that trying to decipher some of these backfield situations isn't so difficult when you think about what coaches value in a running back. And really it's, not fumbling and just running the play the way that it's supposed to be run. Matt, you have something to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that, when David Johnson says, look, I've learned a lot from Chris Johnson this past offseason. He's taught me a lot. I have to learn more about being patient. And that's one of those situations that, again, people forget that it's nice to have, a 120-yard gain on 12 touches, but at the same time, if you lose that game, or it's a lot closer than it should have been, because on 3rd and 2, you don't run the blocking scheme, don't understand the blocking scheme or how to read it well, and Chris Johnson's going to be able to give you those types of yards because he understands how to run that scheme. Teams would rather have 3rd and 4, 2nd and 3 than 2nd and 12, 3rd and 8, and even though David Johnson gives them all that great stuff, it's the same thing as James Starks. James Starks had some of those issues early on in his career where you see him bust off some runs and go, oh, he's going to be this next good guy, and all the beat writers go crazy because beat writers also like speed, strength, and size, and they sometimes don't see that while they're talking to people, and making contacts or looking down at their phone rather than looking at the practice. Sorry, it's just some beat writers. But when that happens, They overemphasize the wrong things, and they don't realize that it's about scheme fit. It's about being consistent at the right time and executing within what they want them to do, and not being the guy that can break a 50-yard run, because there's a lot of guys that can do that, but can't do the little things that make an offense successful as a team player.
Bryce Brown. Yeah, and
Lawrence Moroney.
Moni Moroney. Jason Wood, love you, man. We got to get you in this booth soon. And Eric Stoner said a week ago, a lot of these backfields are clear situations that people think if you just default to who's the coach most likely to trust. And Marcus Mosher, always a big fan of Marcus's work, said typically it's a guy who doesn't fumble and won't get his quarterback killed. And coaches, look, the bottom line is this: coaches value different things than what we tend to value, or at least we tend to gravitate to as fantasy players. Hopefully, as fantasy players, you will continue to gravitate to this show. We love you. We love our audience. We love the idea that we're going to be spending a lot of quality time together over the next 5 months. It's great. And just the little drip. We've got Dr. Gene always there to navigate, and also to help us maybe keep things lighter. And every now and then, at least when it comes to Ryan Mathews, we really need to get that telemetry. Anybody out there that knows how we can do that, get the cuff on Dr. Gene, we can have that down in the corner there. That would add another element to the show, and it would make sort of like a game show for us to try to see if we can get the race car in the red. But we're all going to be a race car in the red as football gets closer and closer, as more and more things happen to change the complexion of our drafts, to change the complexion of the upcoming season. It's always still about football. And again, on behalf of Cecil, thanks everybody. We're La Familia here, and everybody out there sending positive vibes his way and to his family. We appreciate that, and it's always about shared experience. It's always about being there for each other. Like Joe would say, we're here to help each other, walk each other home at night, and we do love spending that walk with you all. You do as much for us as we do for you, more even, and thank you for encouraging us. It's a beautiful thing to know that we've got another year together, and hopefully we have a lot more years together here on the Audible. So we will be continuing with the preseason watch list. Of course, Dr. Gene's going to be continuing the pup dates, Matt Waldman, the gut check, and many other wonderful things at footballguys.com. This is our time of year, folks, and fasten your seatbelts. This is going to be a lot of fun. We love spending this time with you always because you do stay classy.